Claire Miller had always believed she knew her husband better than anyone. For 11 years, Ethan had been her safe place at Tom, steady man who made her feel grounded in a world that often spun too fast. Together, they had built a quiet life in Seattle, raising 2 kids, sharing morning coffees, and exchanging sleepy smiles after long days. From the outside, the Millers looked like the perfect American family. But one chilly evening in late autumn, that perfect picture began to crack. It started innocently enough. Claire was cleaning Ethan's home office, sorting through old blueprints and bills, when she found an envelope tucked between the folders. It wasn't hidden deeply, but something about it felt out of place. The handwriting on it wasn't Ethan's. It was softer, looped, almost delicate, written by someone else. She hesitated, telling herself it was probably work. Ethan was an architect. He received all sorts of correspondence. But curiosity has a way of whispering louder than reason. And before she knew it, her fingers had already unsealed the flap. Inside was a single photograph. It was old, slightly faded at the corners, but the image was clear. Ethan sat on a hospital chair, smiling tenderly as he held a newborn baby in his arms. His expression wasn't the polite smile he gave during family photos. It was different. Real. Deep. And on the back, in faint ink, were a few words. Welcome to the world. Noah, 2011. Claire froze. Her mind went blank for a moment, as if the air had been pulled from the room. 2011. That was 2 years before they were married. She tried to breathe, tried to think logically. Maybe the baby belonged to a friend. Maybe Ethan had just been there for support. But the way he looked at that child, there was something intimate about it. Something that told her this wasn't just someone else's story. She placed the photo back inside the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. Every instinct told her to wait for Ethan, to ask him directly, to demand an explanation. But then another thought crept in, a quieter, more fearful one. What if she wasn't ready to hear the truth? When Ethan came home that evening, his usual warmth filled the house. He greeted her with a tired smile, kissed her cheek, and scooped their youngest into his arms. He looked the same as he always did, gentle, loving, ordinary. And somehow that made it harder. Because if there was a secret, he was hiding it behind eyes that had never once looked like they were lying. Claire tried to act normal. She laughed at dinner, helped with homework, and folded laundry beside him. But every time she looked at him, she saw that photograph in her mind. The tiny baby. Ethan's soft expression. The handwriting that wasn't hers. That night, after the kids were asleep, she lay beside him in bed, pretending to scroll through her phone while her mind raced. Ethan turned toward her, brushing his thumb against her arm. "You're quiet tonight," he said softly. "Just tired," she replied, her voice calm, practiced. He smiled faintly, kissed her forehead, and drifted to sleep. But Claire didn't. She stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every memory of their relationship. Was there ever a moment he had hesitated before telling her something? A phone call he stepped outside to take. A trip he said was for work that didn't quite make sense. She couldn't think of anything. Ethan had always been open, honest, or at least he had seemed to be. She thought of how much they had built together. Their home, their children, their small but happy life. The idea that any part of it could be built on a secret made her chest tighten. Maybe this was nothing, she told herself again. Maybe she was reading too much into it. But no matter how she tried to convince herself, one thought kept echoing in her mind. If it was nothing, why had he never told her? The next morning, Claire got up early, made breakfast for the kids, and sent them off to school. Ethan kissed her goodbye before heading to work, unaware of the storm brewing behind her calm smile. The moment he left, she went back to his office, staring at the drawer where she had found the envelope. She took it out again, running her thumb over the words written on the back of the photo. Noah, she whispered the name under her breath. It felt strange, foreign, and heavy all at once. A part of her wanted to tear the photograph apart, to destroy it and pretend she'd never seen it. But she couldn't, because deep down, she needed to know. That evening, when Ethan came home, Claire studied him carefully, the way he loosened his tie, the way he asked about her day, the way he knelt down to tie their son's shoe before dinner. Everything about him looked so normal, so familiar. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that a stranger had walked into her house wearing her husband's face. Over dinner, she caught herself staring. Ethan noticed. "You're sure you're okay?" He asked again, that same gentle concern in his tone. "I'm fine," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just a long day." He nodded, accepting her answer. But something in his eyes told her he sensed more than she wanted him to. That night, she tucked the photograph deep inside her jewelry box. Under old letters and keepsakes, somewhere she knew he wouldn't find it. She wasn't ready to confront him, not yet. She needed time. She needed to think, but no matter how much she tried to silence her thoughts, one truth was already forming inside her heart. Secrets don't stay buried forever. Days passed, but the image of that child lingered in her mind. When Ethan was at work, she found herself staring at the photo again, memorizing every detail. The baby's small hand curled around his finger. The way Ethan's eyes seemed to hold an emotion she couldn't quite name, something deeper than happiness, something close to love and regret at the same time. Claire didn't tell anyone. Not her sister, not her closest friend, not even her mother. How could she? To speak it aloud would make it real, and she wasn't ready for that. She just carried the secret inside her, pretending her world hadn't changed when. In truth, it already had. Every morning. She looked at her husband and wondered, who was he before he became the man she knew? What story had he kept locked away, and why had he felt the need to hide it? She didn't have the answers yet. But one thing was certain: whatever this secret was, it wasn't staying hidden much longer. Because the moment Claire opened that envelope, she had opened something far bigger, the first crack in the perfect life. She thought she knew, and once the truth starts to surface, there's no going back. From the moment Claire found that photograph, everything changed. She didn't tell Ethan, but the secret burned inside her every day. It sat like a heavy stone in her chest, making it hard to breathe, hard to smile. She woke up next to him every morning, but now she saw him differently, not as her husband, but as a man she didn't fully know. Every small thing he did made her wonder if it was connected to that hidden life. The distance between them wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, slow, and painful. She tried to act normal. She still packed the kids' lunches, helped them with homework, and greeted Ethan with a smile when he came home. But there was a hollowness behind her eyes that he couldn't miss. He noticed her silence, the way she would drift off in thought or flinch when he reached for her hand. "Claire," he said one evening, his voice calm but concerned. "What's going on with you lately?" "Nothing," she replied too quickly. "Just tired. Work, kids, life fits a lot." He nodded slowly, but didn't look convinced. "You sure?" "Yes," she lied, but the truth was eating her alive. Every night when Ethan fell asleep beside her, she would lie awake staring into the dark, her mind replaying that single image: Ethan holding the baby, his eyes filled with warmth she couldn't unsee. The name on the back of the photograph no echoed in her head. Who was that child? Where was he now? Did Ethan still see him? The questions didn't fade. They grew louder. And with every day she kept silent, her heart grew heavier. One weekend, Ethan mentioned he had to drive to Portland for a client meeting. It wasn't unusual, he sometimes traveled for work, but this time, something about it made her stomach twist. Portland. That was the same city written on the back of the photograph. She remembered it clearly. She didn't say anything. She kissed him goodbye, watched his car disappear down the street, and then stood in the kitchen for a long time, her heart pounding. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She needed to know. Later that afternoon, Claire got in her own car and drove. The hours passed in silence, the road stretching endlessly before her. The sky was gray, the kind of sky that mirrored her mood, heavy and uncertain. She didn't even know what she was hoping to find. Maybe proof that she was wrong. Maybe peace. Maybe closure. When she reached Portland, she followed the address written faintly on the back of the photo. It led her to a small neighborhood, quiet and ordinary. The houses were old but well kept, with trees arching over the street. She parked her car across from a small blue house and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then a familiar figure stepped out of a car and walked toward the front door. Her breath caught in her throat. It was Ethan. He wasn't supposed to be there and not like this, not outside a house that had nothing to do with work. He looked nervous, glancing around before knocking. The door opened and a woman appeared. She looked to be in her early 30s, soft brown hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She smiled when she saw him. And then from behind her, a young boy came running out. The boy looked about 9 years old. And when Claire saw his face, her heart stopped. The resemblance was undeniable. The same green eyes, the same smile, the same dimple that Ethan had. It was the baby from the photograph, grown now alive. And real Claire watched as Ethan crouched down and hugged the boy. It wasn't a polite hug, it was a father's hug. Long, warm, and full of love. The boy laughed, his arms tight around Ethan's neck. Claire's chest tightened. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. She felt the world spin around her. The man she had trusted with her life was living another truth. Behind her back, she sat frozen until Ethan went inside the house. Then she finally started her car and drove away. Her eyes were wet, her hands shaking on the wheel. She didn't know how she got back to Seattle. The whole drive was a blur of tears and disbelief. That night, Ethan came home like nothing had happened. He smiled, kissed her, and told her his meeting went well. He even brought home her favorite coffee from a Portland cafe. That simple act, so thoughtful, so ordinary, broke something inside her. How could he lie so easily? How long had he been living this double life? Claire didn't say anything. She couldn't, not yet. Instead, she watched him laugh with their kids at dinner, pretending everything was fine. Her heart ached as she realized how much she still loved him despite the pain. But love couldn't erase the image of him holding that child. The days after that were unbearable. She moved through her routine like a ghost, smiling on the outside, breaking on the inside. She tried to convince herself there had to be a reason. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe Ethan was helping the woman out of kindness. But no matter how hard she tried to rationalize, the truth always found its way back into her thoughts. At night, she replayed the moment over and over: the hug, the smile, the boy's laughter. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was real. And Ethan was lying to her face. Still, she hesitated to confront him. Fear held her back, not just fear of what he'd say, but fear of what the truth would do to their family. What if this secret destroyed everything? What if telling him she knew made him leave? She couldn't bear the thought of her kids losing their father, of their world collapsing, so she stayed silent. She woke up each day and pretended not to know. She kept cooking breakfast, making school runs, folding his shirts, acting as if her heart wasn't shattering piece by piece. But the silence became its own kind of poison. Her best friend, Melissa, noticed something was wrong. "You've been so quiet lately," she said during a coffee meet. "You look tired. Is everything okay at home?" Claire forced a smile. "Everything's fine. Just busy." Melissa gave her a knowing look but didn't press. Claire was grateful for that. She wasn't ready to talk. One night while Ethan was asleep, Claire stood in the hallway, staring at the family photos on the wall. Their wedding picture, their first Christmas with the kids, the vacations, the birthdays, the smiles, all the little moments that made up their life. They looked perfect. But now she knew better. Behind every smile in those pictures, there was something missing, something Ethan hadn't told her. The truth was out there, living in another house, with another child. Claire whispered to herself, "Why didn't you trust me with the truth?" But there was no answer, only silence. And that silence was heavier than any lie as days turned into weeks. Claire felt herself reaching a breaking point. The weight of what she knew was too much to carry alone. Every time Ethan left the house, she wondered if he was going to see them again. Every time he said, "I love you," she wanted to ask, "Do you mean me or the other family too?" She didn't know when or how, but she knew the truth would have to come out. She couldn't keep living this way pretending not to know. pretending not to hurt. And deep down, she sensed that day was coming soon. Because secrets, no matter how deeply buried, always find their way to the surface. And when they do, it changes everything. The silence between Claire and Ethan had stretched into something unbearable. Every conversation felt rehearsed, every smile forced. Ethan could feel her slipping away, but he didn't know why. Claire, on the other hand, knew exactly why, and she couldn't hold it in much longer. The image of him in Portland with the little boy haunted her every waking moment. She couldn't eat properly, couldn't sleep. The weight of what she knew was crushing her. That Sunday evening, rain poured against the windows. The kids were staying at Claire's mother's house for the weekend, and the house was unusually quiet. Ethan sat on the couch, reading emails on his laptop, while Claire stood in the kitchen staring at him. Her heart was racing. She couldn't keep pretending. She had spent weeks thinking about what to say, but now that the moment was here, her words felt tangled. Still, she knew it was time. "Ethan," she said softly. He looked up. "Yeah," she swallowed hard. "I went to Portland." His face changed instantly. He froze, staring at her as if she'd just spoken another language. What do you mean?" Her voice was shaking, but her eyes were steady. "I saw you there. I saw you go into that blue house. I saw the woman, and I saw the boy." Ethan's laptop slipped from his hands onto the couch. For a long moment, he said nothing. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. His expression shifted from shock to guilt, and then to quiet surrender. He rubbed his hands over his face, breathing deeply. "Claire," he finally said, his voice low, almost broken, "I can explain." Claire sat down across from him, her hands trembling in her lap. "Then explain," she whispered. "Because I've been dying every day waiting for you to tell me something, anything." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," he said slowly, "but I need you to understand everything before you decide what to think of me." He took a deep breath and began. "Before I met you," he said, "I was in a relationship with a woman named Rachel. It wasn't serious at first, but we cared about each other. We broke up after a few months. Honestly, we weren't right for each other. But about 6 months later, she called me. She told me she was pregnant." Claire's stomach twisted. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, her eyes fixed on him. Ethan continued. "I wanted to be there for her, but she made it clear she didn't want anything from me. She said she could handle it alone. I respected that, but I stayed in touch just to make sure she and the baby were okay. When Noah was born, I went to see him. That was the photo you found. I only saw him a few times in those early years. Rachel wanted privacy, and I agreed. I was young, scared, and, honestly, shamed. I didn't tell anyone, not even my parents." He paused, his hands clenched together. "Then I met you. And for the first time, I felt like I could start fresh. I didn't want my past to ruin what we had. I told myself I'd find the right time to explain everything, but as the years went by, it just got harder. I didn't know how to tell you without breaking what we built." Claire's heart ached as she listened. She wanted to be angry, but she also heard the pain in his voice. Still, the betrayal cut deep. "So you lied," she said quietly. "All these years. I didn't mean to lie," he said quickly. "I was trying to protect you. Protect our family." Her voice rose, sharp with emotion. "Protect me from what, Ethan?" "The truth. You didn't even give me the chance to decide how I felt about it. You built this wall between us and called it protection." Ethan stood and walked to the window, his reflection ghostly against the glass. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said softly. "Rachel didn't want her son confused. She didn't want him knowing me as his father while I had another family. So I supported them quietly. I visited sometimes, but I made sure it didn't affect us. I swear, Claire, it wasn't about choosing them over you. It was about keeping the peace." Claire looked down at her hands. "You've been seeing him. The boy, Noah." "Yes," Ethan admitted. "Once every few months. Rachel lives alone. She's never asked for money or help. I wanted to be a part of Noah's life, even if only from a distance." Claire closed her eyes. "Do the kids know?" No, he said immediately. No one knows except you and Rachel. And now? Now Noah is starting to ask questions. He's old enough to wonder why I only visit sometimes. That's why I went to Portland recently. Rachel wanted to talk about what to tell him. The silence that followed was heavy. The only sound was the rain tapping softly against the glass. Claire's throat tightened. You should have told me, she whispered. I could have understood. I could have helped. Ethan turned around, his eyes filled with regret. I know, but every time I thought about it, I imagined losing you. I didn't want this to change how you saw me. You're my life, Claire. You and the kids, you're everything. Her tears finally spilled. But it did change how I see you. Not because of your past, Ethan, but because of this secret. You took away my right to share in your truth. Ethan moved closer, his voice breaking. You're right. I did. And I hate myself for it. But I need you to know nothing about my love for you was ever a lie. I've loved you since the day I met you. This, he gestured helplessly. This was fear, not betrayal. Claire looked up at him, eyes red, searching his face for honesty. And she saw it the raw, open regret. The man in front of her wasn't the same one she thought she married. He was more complicated, more flawed, more human. But love, she realized, wasn't about perfection. It was about what came after the truth. I don't know how to move past this, she said quietly. Then I'll wait, Ethan replied, as long as it takes. I'll answer every question. I'll show you everything. No more secrets. I just don't want to lose you. The room was still. For the first time in weeks, there were no lies between the lonely pain, truth, and the faint hope that maybe honesty could rebuild what deceit had broken. Claire finally stood, her expression soft but weary. I need time, she said. Ethan nodded. Take all the time you need. As she walked past him, she paused. What's he like? She asked suddenly. Noah, Ethan smiled faintly, the first real smile of the night. He's kind, curious. He loves to draw. He looks a lot like you'd imagine our son would have if we'd met earlier. Claire's eyes glistened again. She nodded, then quietly left the room. Ethan stood there, staring out at the rain, feeling the weight of years of silence finally lifting off his shoulders, only to be replaced by a new weight. The fear of losing the woman he loved most. That night, both of them lay awake in separate rooms, hearts aching, knowing the truth had finally come out. And though it hurt, they both understood one thing: love can survive almost anything except lies. Now that the truth was out, it was time to see if love could also forgive. The days after Ethan's confession were heavy with silence. Not the tense kind that came from anger, but the quiet that follows when two people have said everything they could. The truth was finally out, and now it hung between them, raw, real, and waiting for something to happen. Claire moved through the house like someone relearning how to live. Every corner, every memory of their life together carried a different weight now. She didn't look at Ethan with hate, but with a sadness that ran deep. Ethan gave her space. He didn't try to fix things overnight. He went to work, came home on time, cooked dinner, helped the kids, and treated her gently as if she might break. He didn't push, didn't explain again. He had already said it all. Now it was up to her to decide if their story would end in forgiveness or distance. For weeks, Claire avoided big conversations. She needed time to breathe, to process what she had learned. She didn't want to make a decision from pain or pride. At night, she often sat by the window, staring at the quiet street, replaying Ethan's words in her head. He hadn't cheated. He hadn't betrayed her love in that way. But he had hidden something huge, something that mattered deeply. And that kind of silence was its own kind of betrayal still. When she thought about him, the man who had been there through sickness, through raising two kids, through every high and low of their life, she couldn't erase all that good because of one secret. She was hurt, but she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, she found Ethan sitting in the backyard with a cup of coffee, staring up at the night sky. The air was cool, and the city lights glowed faintly in the distance. For a long time, she just stood at the door watching him. wondering how love could be so simple and so complicated at the same time. Finally, she stepped outside. "Mind if I sit?" she asked quietly. He looked up, surprised but grateful. Of course. They sat side by side in silence, the air filled with the soft hum of crickets. Finally, she said, "You were right about one thing." He turned to her slowly. "What's that?" "That the truth would hurt. But it's still better than not knowing." Ethan nodded. "I should have told you years ago. Every day I didn't, I made it worse. I thought I was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself." Claire looked at him, her eyes softer now. "I know, but I wish you had trusted me enough to tell me the truth sooner. We could have faced it together." "I know," he whispered, "and I'll carry that regret forever." They fell silent again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It felt like a quiet beginning, something fragile but real. A few days later, Claire asked Ethan if she could meet Noah. He froze for a second, unsure if he'd heard her right. "Are you sure?" he asked carefully. "Yes," she said. "I think it's time. He's a part of you, which means he's a part of our story too. I don't know what it'll feel like, but I want to see him." That Saturday, they drove to Portland together. The drive was calm. No tears, no tension, just quiet understanding. When they arrived at the small blue house, Claire's hands were shaking. But she took a deep breath and followed Ethan to the door. Rachel answered. Her face was cautious at first, then softened when she saw Claire beside Ethan. "You must be Claire," she said kindly. "Yes," Claire replied, her voice gentle but steady. "Thank you for letting me come." Rachel nodded and stepped aside. "Noah's in the backyard. He's been waiting." When Claire saw the boy, her heart melted. Noah was sitting on the grass, sketching something on a notepad. When he looked up and saw Ethan, his face lit up. "You came," he said, running toward him. Ethan hugged him tightly, smiling in a way Claire hadn't seen in weeks. Then the boy turned to her, curious. "And this is?" he asked. Ethan hesitated for a moment, glancing at Claire. She gave a small nod. "This is Claire," he said softly. "She's someone very important to me." Noah smiled shyly. Hi, Noah," she replied warmly. As the afternoon went on, they all talked. Claire watched the boy laugh, his eyes bright with innocence. She could see Ethan in him, the same warmth, the same way of listening carefully before speaking. It was strange at first, but not painful. In fact, it felt natural, almost healing. When they left, Claire turned to Ethan in the car. "He's a good kid," she said quietly. Ethan smiled faintly. "He is." She looked out the window, her thoughts swirling. "He deserves to know who his father really is. And our kids. They deserve to know the truth too. Secrets hurt people, Ethan. We can't keep living like that." He nodded. "You're right. I'll tell them, but only if you're ready to." "I am," she said. Back home, they sat their children down and told them the truth in simple, honest words. The kids were confused at first, but they didn't get angry. Children, Claire realized, often understood more than adults gave them credit for. What mattered to them most wasn't the past itch, was that their parents were honest now. The months that followed weren't easy, but they were real. There were still moments of hurt. Times when Claire would see Ethan lost in thought and wonder if he was thinking about his other child. But she didn't let those thoughts poison her heart. Instead, she chose to talk about them, to ask, to listen, and to rebuild. Ethan, for his part, kept his promise. No more secrets. He told her everything about the years of guilt, the fear, the quiet visits. He showed her